Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's NeoSystems CMMC Town Hall. Now I'd like to introduce your host, Ed Bassett from NeoSystems. Ed?
Thanks, Don, and welcome everybody to our continuing series of Town Hall Ask Me Anything sessions on cybersecurity maturity model certification. My guest today is Mary Jo Thomas from General Dynamics Bath Iron Works. Welcome, Mary Jo.
Thank you.
I do want to mention to the audience that we are recording these sessions as part of our community outreach to the Defense Industrial Base. Our focus at NeoSystems as a managed service provider is on organizations seeking certification under the CMMC program, and that's primarily who we have in our audience today. If you have some questions for MJ, please send those in on the Q&A session within Zoom, and I'll try to work some of those into the discussion as we proceed here today. I'll start with introduction of MJ. Mary Jo has had a distinguished career in government as an Air Force officer, a state police officer, and nearly 20 years in the FBI, focusing on counterintelligence and counterterrorism. She's now the Director of Security at General Dynamics Bath Iron Works, where she is managing all the security functions, including cyber, industrial, and physical security. So needless to say, with that background, MJ is an expert in the protection of the weapons, technology, and intellectual property that underpin our national security. In the prep for this call, MJ mentioned about people putting their counterintelligence hat on, and MJ's counterintelligence hat is bigger than all of the rest of ours, and she wears it, I think, all day, every day. So first thing she puts on in the morning. So MJ, I'm hoping today you can use that counterintelligence hat to kind of shed some light on not just CMMC, but maybe the larger context of things. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Ed. We're all getting in that CMMC mode right now, but I think one of the things that maybe we don't talk about enough is why we're here. I think everybody's focused on the mechanics of becoming compliant and the NIST standards and what level you are, but I don't think anybody's ever taken the time to say why we're doing this. So I spent my career watching the adversary steal our defense research and our defense technology from subcontractors in the defense industrial base. So I was very happy to be on this side to educate people on why it's important to lock down our systems, make sure that we are secure, because daily, and I won't get into specifics, we're dealing with issues where people are trying to get into our systems. And just by way of kind of a CMMC supply chain incident, we recently ordered 4 new servers from a company, and those servers went missing for 3 weeks, and then they showed up. And I told them, you cannot hook those to our system. I don't know where they've been for 3 weeks, but based on my experience in the FBI, there's no box I can't get into. And so we sent them back. So supply chain is kind of everywhere. And I don't want to jump Katie Arrington's gun here, but CMC is going to be kind of matched up with supply chain and the validation of supply chain. But I want people to understand how the adversary is getting in. So that's kind of the counterintelligence hat.
So last time you joined us here was in November, and since then we had some really high-profile state-sponsored attacks, right? And to me, at least, they really shake the trust foundation. SolarWinds, where we had an attack that went right to the heart of the software. It was delivered in a trusted manner to everyone who was a customer. Microsoft Exchange, a zero-day bug, not unusual, but widespread exploitation of something that's widely deployed. So what you mentioned, how the adversary is getting in. They're getting in, right? So these are some pretty high-profile events. How do those events? I mean, do they change your perspective, or is that something that I guess you already seeing with your counterintelligence hat that maybe others of us are taking for granted a little more than we should?
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked, but I wasn't shocked, and I think if prior to the transition of the administration, you heard Ellen Lord, the Undersecretary for Acquisition and Engineering, that they're coming in on like the weakest link, the link that you would not suspect. And I have not studied SolarWinds all the way down that supply chain, but I do understand that code was written at a level 6 or 7 levels back and then kind of baked in to that software solution. I quite frankly wish I had the answer of how we're going to look at all these software solutions and read the code to make sure that there's not something nefarious written in there. But supply chain is going to be a whole new thing now, with not just your supplier, but who supplies them. And a good example I give to people, because it's out there, is when Marriott acquired Starwood, or was it Star, the hotel?
Yeah, Starwood, yeah.
You know, so the Marriott didn't have enough time to really do an assessment on, you know, the cybersecurity of Starwood hotels, and they ingested this backdoor, and all those millions of PII was stolen. And so we really need to look at who is acquired by our supply chain, who they're partnered with, and the technology, where that technology is coming from, you know, because that in itself could be compromised and we could be baking it in. So supply chain is very complex these days.
So one of the, thinking about what we could do as consumers who are buying software, other hardware as well, you mentioned, what we can do. One of the things that SolarWinds mentioned as they started talking about their response and what they've done is they said, hey, we've done all these things to beef up our level of visibility and our security in response to this, you know, essentially catastrophic event for them. And their suggestion was, all of you consumers should ask all the other vendors to do that too. Like, we're doing it because we had a catastrophe, but that doesn't mean everybody else is doing it. So what's your reaction to that? I mean, should we be demanding different things from the people we're buying from?
I think you should. Like, I would say, as an FBI agent and running a cyber squad, we had a duty to notify. So we would know through what we're working on that a small company had been compromised. And we go out there and we'd say, hey, you've been compromised by Russia, China, whoever it was. And, you know, by the third time we went out there and notified them, like, they never fixed the problem. Like, they just didn't take responsibility for fixing the problem. And we've had a vendor here that, you know, has been compromised by some entity in Russia. And we've notified them and said, listen, you've been compromised. You need to kind of address this. And they failed to address it. So, I mean, I said, we're blocking their email because I can't afford for it to come in. And I think they're coming through the weakest link. They're not coming in through the highly technical kind of way of hacking us. They're coming in through that soft supply chain.
Interesting point, because the SolarWinds, you know, that was detected not by SolarWinds, it was detected by FireEye, was the first one to really make it public. But SolarWinds, it's a substantial company, and they had the wherewithal to take that information and do something useful with it, right? They were able to investigate this and you know, come up with a meaningful response. But not every company that we may buy from has those kind of resources, right, or those kind of capabilities.
No, it's true. You know, the more and more I read through, you know, the CMMC and the requirements for, you know, the 17 standards for 1 to 2, and then you go to 130 for level 3, you know, and I see what my team does just to ensure that we're certified here. It is going to be a challenge. And some things that, you know, I've talked to the supply chain and procurement people is, first of all, do these people need to be level 3? I mean, what are we sharing with them that they need to be level 3? And sometimes I think, we don't have to give them all that we're giving them. You know what I mean? We have to just give them the L bracket. We don't have to give them the contract, because the contract makes them, you know, level 3, but not the L bracket. And, you know, this idea of, you know, also having enclaves, like the entire system doesn't have to be level 3. Maybe we just need a smaller enclave. But, you know, they're going to have to adhere to some kind of security standard, unfortunately, in order to deal with Department of Defense.
So you mentioned the weakest links, and right, I think everybody's kind of heard that story, that's where I mean, makes sense, right? That's where the targeting is going to be. You mentioned looking at suppliers to see, do they really need this data? So as we've talked to different primes, we've heard kind of a big spectrum of responses. Some of the primes are actively trying to lower the number of people that they share CUI with, right? Lower the amount of information flow for 2 reasons. 1, it reduces the attack surface, right? It reduces the number of weakest links out there. And 2, it reduces the burden on those suppliers. If they don't have to be CMMC level 3, then their life is somewhat easier. So some people are actively managing it that way. We've also seen some primes that are on the other end of the spectrum saying, hey, if you have DFAR 7012, then you need to comply with 800-171, even if you don't have any CUI, even if you don't have any covered contractor information systems, send us your SPURS score right away. And the suppliers are like, well, what should I do? I see the clause in my contract, but I don't have any systems. upon which to calculate a score. So they're being told, hey, you need to come up and have this capability. So, level up, get those capabilities within your company. So as you look at this from Bath Iron Works perspective, are you actively managing that? And are you trying to, I guess, maybe doing either of those things or a combination of both those things?
Well, it's challenging. We have other business units within General Dynamics that I think they have a good process in place. Here I don't own supply chain, I own cybersecurity. So it's kind of a collaborative effort between me and supply chain. And some of those things that you said, I've suggested that they do, because if everybody doesn't have to have CUI, then why give it unnecessarily? So you have to educate those procurement people on why are we giving what we're giving. But I also understand that if you're just coming over here to, pick up a trash can, you have to be level 1, And if we're communicating with you via email and we're sending you invoices via email and everything's kind of a cyber contract, whatever, they're going to have to be level 1. I have not gotten away from certain groups don't have to be level 1. I mean, if that's the question that you're asking.
Well, it seems pretty clear anybody has to be level 1 if they're doing business at all, right? I mean, it would almost be impossible to not have any, at least federal contract information. But there's a big leap certainly between level 1 and level 3.
Oh,
right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I guess maybe taking this back up to the sort of supply chain level, how much of that challenges you talked about at the beginning does CMMC solve? And what else do we need to do? Like the CMMC doesn't solve all of this, right? The COTS exemption says things like SolarWinds software don't have to be CMMC. Microsoft was on this series and said they don't believe that their software products have to be CMMC, although they're voluntarily doing that. So yeah, CMMC solves a piece of it. What piece, and what are the other pieces that we need to also be thinking about?
So I know I'm happy to see CMMC happening. I think it's going to be some false starts, and we start over. We're working through that process. I would say my biggest fear every day is insider threat. That's what hurt a lot of us, was insider threat. I mean, just last week we had a person give notice, and then within the hour they emailed themselves a proprietary document. So it's just my cyber folks are phenomenal that they're catching all this stuff. But there's multiple vectors, and I don't know if you've ever shared that kind of threat vector wheel with your. I'll send it to you. Maybe you can share it another time. But there's like a dozen different ways that the adversary is stealing defense technology and research. The joint ventures, the Marriott Starwood example, non-traditional collectors, cyber, academia, the intelligence officers. I mean, academia is a big one right now. I'm concerned about any research partnerships we have with the university right now. There's multiple ways, but CMMC is a big one because it's so easy. And just talking to my folks where, they see the perimeter attacks, we have all of a sudden like a spike in attacks from Iran. And I don't know what causes that, but people are coming in. And so if we let them in via, a compromised vendor, then it'll be too late then.
So you've talked previously about making cyber more explicit in procurement, and the fact that you as a security officer, it's hard to enforce things that are not called out specifically in the contracting process. So does CMMC fill that gap that you've mentioned, or is there still a missing piece? Like, it makes it explicit, you have to have CMMC or you can't get it, but it doesn't cover all the bases as you just described. So as you're thinking about the procurement process and some of your struggles to get people to do what you believe is the right thing, has DoD solved that problem, or is there still some work to be done there?
I mean, because I just only left the Pentagon less than a year ago. I mean, I like the direction they're going in, and I think Katie has done like a tremendous amount, and it was much needed. But it's not like once CMMC is up and running, we're done, and I think she knows that as well, because supply chain's coming in right behind it. There's just different ways, and I want my cyber people not just to be what I call, and I hope they don't take this as derogatory, like zeros and ones people. I really want to elevate them to be kind of security aware. What are the different technical ways someone could get into our system or compromise our systems? It's not just through an email. It's not just through a hack. There's multiple ways they can get into the system. And I really want to elevate them to be more counterintelligence, because we're a defense contractor, more counterintelligence savvy, more security savvy outside that just protect that port, you know, if that makes sense. Because I am not a zeros and ones person. I try to make that clear to everybody.
One thing I think CMMC has done a lot of, and again, whether it solves the procurement angle, I'm not, and I guess, close enough to the procurement side to see, but it seems to have opened up a dialogue that didn't exist before, where, you know, I think before contracts would put the DFARS 7012 clause in there, and the person receiving it would do whatever attestation they had to do, but there wasn't a dialogue beyond that about, hey, what exactly are you doing around security? So I guess, hey, first, have you seen that dialogue is more detail oriented than it used to be, about what the suppliers are and aren't doing and aren't capable of? Because that's something that's coming to your office.
I do think there's increase in dialogue. We're all talking more. I wouldn't say it's like super exciting dialogue. You know, this is a new responsibility leveraged on folks who already have a ton of work to do. And something that I found out, at least in the defense side of the house, that, you know, they have to follow everything in the contract to a T, you know. So right now, this is not in any of our existing contracts, but we know it's coming. So you have to prepare for it to come. And so we've gotten ourselves kind of, we're ready to go, but the supply chain needs to be educated. I mean, like I said earlier, I have amazing people. I'm not sure every subcontractor or supplier has an amazing team, and that's probably what they're struggling with. But yes, we are talking, and I spend a lot of time in meetings trying to educate them in why this is important to do, not just be kind of annoyed that you have another thing you have to get done today. It's hugely important for national security, and I couldn't be any more passionate about it. That I'm not saying it's the only answer, because as soon as you plug up one hole, it's been in my career, they find another way to get around. But right now we need to work on this one.
So what are you hearing from folks in the supply chain? Are they asking for assistance? Are they looking for guidance from you as their prime, in terms of how they should comply? Like, what is that?
So
what
I
are you
said,
hearing
you know,
from them?
it's kind of just like, you know, a big project that gets dumped on you, and then you never really experienced this before, and you're following the rules and you're reading what CMMC is all about. But I said, you know, we need to get organized, because this is a big project with our supply chain. So, you know, I use the DoD terms of rack and stack. So we need to carve out who we actually share CUI with and put them in a group, and then carve out who our single source suppliers are, because they're going to be incredibly critical if all of a sudden this is a huge project for them to get to level 3. And they may choose to say, it's too much for us, we want to get out of the defense business, and we'll just keep our commercial business. So we have to make sure that we're educating them and telling them, these are the resources you have, this is what you can do. And so I've tried to tell them to put them in categories, and I've been in calls with our senior staff here about doing that. That way you can prioritize where you need to put your limited resources to. I think it's an overwhelming project, because I think many of the special clients have thousands of subs and contractors that provide them the materials they need to do their business. So I think for those people who don't really even understand why they're having to do it, they can't get passionate about it. I'm trying to kind of get into their, you know, that side of them to say, listen, this is really worth the effort, you know, go the extra mile and let's get organized. So I've had those conversations with them.
Cool. I mean, that's primarily who we're working with, is folks that, you know, that are looking for a way to do this and don't have this as an in-house expertise, right? They don't have their own security shop, and they're looking for a way to meet the requirement without having that. And, you know, that's the idea, is to make it something that if they want to do it, they can do it. I guess that's the challenge. So one of the things that we've seen, you mentioned earlier, enclaves, and the idea of maybe, you know, shrinking the footprint, right? You mentioned not sending the CUI to the supplier. But we've seen some folks building enclaves to say, we'll have the suppliers come and work on the data on our IT, since we have the capability to protect it and they may not. And that way, they don't take it home, they don't store it and process it.
Right.
And so that it relieves them of having to figure some of this stuff out. Does that seem like a useful strategy that Prime should consider? Are you guys doing anything like that? I mean, is that a part of your solution set?
I wish I was the big decision maker, but I do like that solution. That and I think it even protects, the CUI. You get an entity that's super adept at cybersecurity and controlling access and holding the sensitive data, and then allowing certain people with certain protocols to gain access to it, rather than have it on site of the contractor. And it takes a lot of burden off of maybe smaller companies who produce very important capability, but maybe not highly complex. And so why have to build this entire system to protect maritime electrical wire? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. Some of these folks that are in very, very niche area,
Correct.
And if IT isn't a big part of that niche, right? They may not have anything besides a few computers laying around that isn't really a key part of their business. It's not something that they've historically had to pay attention to. And here comes CMMC with a lot of very specific rules
Right.
about how they have to handle those things. So,
and I think that's a good segue. Like it's like anything. You start off with someone helping you, because you're smaller, and you start to learn and you learn from them. And then as your business expands and maybe becomes more diversified and you become more profitable, when maybe you decide to build your own IT security capability. But if you're small, I would explore those ideas. I'm definitely not opposed to them. So
taking this maybe a broader view, we focus a lot on this program on things that we as contractors, they're trying to comply, what we need to do. But you mentioned some of these threats. These are significant threats. Some things need to happen elsewhere. So inside of government, maybe outside the DIB, other parts of the commercial sector. You touched on the software industry a little bit. What is, in thinking about this with your big counterintelligence hat on, what needs to happen broadly to counter some of these threats? Of which the DIB is just a piece of that pie.
Well, I mean, if you're talking outside the DIB, we've had our fair share of the challenges with Huawei in the private sector. And I don't know if I should get into great detail about that, but there's surveillance going on, and that was the big concern with Huawei products. And the rolling out of the 889 policy, that there's certain prohibited Chinese, communications, telecommunications, Hikvision and ZTE, they're prohibited for a reason. It's not just let's be mean today and prohibit these things. That there's been research done, and there's things going on. And I think it's like Kaspersky was one that I used to be shocked when I went into Best Buy and you could still see Kaspersky on the shelf, because we had all figured out by then that Kaspersky was, piping your home data into Russia. You know what I mean? So why would you ever do this? And so now no longer do you see them around much, but I still have issues with them. So it's, I talk about, when I get really on my soapbox here about civil military fusion in China, they're basically anything they acquire that's high tech or improves the civilian capability, they marry it to their military capability. And so that's what the private sector has to think about. We've had issues where people have created, very good technical solutions, and then those companies have been bought by China, and the United States loses that technical capability. There's a published, I think it's called Ocean Works, where the Navy had a capability a rescue capability for their submarines, and it was the only sole source provider of that capability. And the company sold it, or tried to sell it, to China through multiple front companies, which would have completely put the Navy out of business as far as being able to rescue anybody in a submarine accident. And that's an adjudicated investigation. So this is how I think about it. You know, I go way out here somewhere and then I kind of wind it all the way back in to see what could hurt us if we took this in. And I think the way procurement is currently doing it, they just kind of go out and they see who has the lowest price, right? And China always has the lowest price. They always have the lowest price. And so they buy that one because it's within budget and it helps them. But I think I said in another briefing, the defense industrial base doesn't have any counterintelligence people in it. And it should hire people to provide guidance or more counterintelligence security professionals or more, you know, military intelligence cyber experts to elevate their programs because those people got additional training that maybe a civilian person right now doesn't have. And so I would be targeting, you know, to improve your workforce with additional education and experience.
How does that translate into for you know, government contractors, right? You say get the counterintelligence function in-house. Is that something that should be regulated? Would you see that, or is it more of a self, you know, we would do this ourselves by seeking out that talent?
Right. So how
do you plug that in? I guess if you're thinking about, okay, I got CMMC, it's mandating certain things. That's my justification for spending some money and some effort. How do I plug counterintelligence into that? Who do I hire? What do I tell them to do?
Yeah. So I think general dynamics across the board, and I can say this because I was in the military, and I would tell you back in the day when I separated, finding a good job was very difficult, you know. But now there are people like me that are, you know, working with our employment and our HR people to actively recruit transitioning military people that either worked at Cyber Command or NSA or wherever they were at, and try to get them into our business so that they can, with their skill set, you know, upgrade our security posture with their knowledge and experience. And I think that would be a morale booster as well, because, you know, you have someone sitting next to you that's done this before, and then you can learn from them. I think it's hard to learn about the threat or the different ways the threat is coming in if this is all you've ever done. You know what I mean? You can read about it, but I spend a lot of time talking to the senior executives here about the way the threat's going to come in here, and they've been great about listening to me, and some changes have been made. So we are actively recruiting military people. So if there's anybody out there, you know.
Cool. So it sounds like maybe a shift away from making the cyber job a more technical sort of IT focused job, and making that more about counterintelligence, threat and risk, those kind of skill sets. Where, you know, in the past, I think, yeah, it's been very common to say, oh, you know, pick somebody that's got network savvy, or, you know, make them in charge of security, right? So it tends to grow from there, where someone starts out with a fairly narrow view about protecting their network or their perimeter or their servers, and then they sort of add other things onto that. I think what you're describing is saying pick somebody from the military that has a sort of broad view of threat and response, and overlay that. Am I reading that right?
All I'm saying is, you know, everybody's about, you know, diversity and diversity of thought too. I'm not just talking about. So I always have built teams where not every person is the same. People have different strengths. They come from different backgrounds, and they have been absolutely the most effective teams because not everybody is alike. And so as the threat has increased, and now we're in this great power competition, we have to kind of rethink how our teams are. I still need those zeros and ones people. I need them to understand and identify the threat and read logs and know all this kind of stuff that I'm really not very good at. But it's good to, when I get with my people and we talk about threat, it's a very robust conversation, and they like seeing it from my perspective. And I learn a lot from their perspective as well. I mean, first thing I did was ask them, like, what could we have done to identify the SolarWinds compromise? And unfortunately, there wasn't anything at that time that was going to say to us, you know, this is compromised. And that's a really big challenge. And the adversary knows that.
Yeah. I mean, it took a company like FireEye that's really at the forefront of their detection capability to do that. I mean, it was a lot of other people were targeted and nobody saw it before them, right? I'm not totally surprised by that, I guess. I mean, they are at the forefront of that in terms of capability.
And they're going out there and they're looking for it. And And I think that SolarWinds is sharing with the community, you know, maybe some of this information that they found. Then, you know, they're really smart people that develop programs to identify these kinds of compromises. We'll take that and ingest it into a software solution that potentially can identify when code's been corrupted or rewritten or anything like that.
Great. So good perspective. Thanks. So we're at the bottom of the hour. I want to ask kind of just one kind of wrap up question. I always like to ask about ways we can get better results. So you've been a frequent contributor. This is your second time on the Town Hall series. You have been a guest and asked some very good questions that always strike me as, you know, really kind of cutting right to the heart of the challenge, right? So of the things that are happening in CMMC, we've watched it evolve. There's some things that people would like more clarity on. This is always a clamoring, you know, more details, more specifics. What's one thing that you would like to make sure is really clarified for everyone at the defense industrial base we would get a good level set on?
Clarify. You know, I think that I don't want anybody, you know, at least in my supply chain to think they're there alone. You know, they're very important to us, and I want us to take care of our supply chain and our subcontractors and educate them. You know, I wish there was, I mean, you guys have a great thing here that we can all get together and talk, but I wish there was more of maybe a consortium where people could come without, you know, fear of like, I can't believe that's what you have, and learn from each other. You know, there are people out there that are solving this problem pretty quickly and efficiently, and then there are others that are struggling with it. And I just wish we had maybe a way to help those people along. And that's why I participate in these things. I mean, if there's one little thing that someone takes away from this that helps them in their program, you know, I want to help them. I want to help them, because you're right. I just cut to the chase quickly. I want them to get there as quickly as possible. So, you know, collaboration, consortium, sharing of best practices, that's really what I would like to see happen in the future.
I agree. That would be phenomenal. I think there's a lot of people all asking the same questions, all seeking the same answer. Mm-hmm. And you're right. If somebody somewhere has come up with a good answer, being able to share that and let other people take advantage of it would be great, right? This is not a competition about who can do the security the best. I mean, obviously we are all in business and there is some competition, but we all need to be thinking about this in terms of how do we do the best for protecting United States intellectual property. And that's about taking good solutions and making them accessible to everyone who has a need for that solution. So that's a great suggestion. I
think if I had 1 minute left just to close, because you know
do.
So when I was in counterterrorism division, I worked at terrorist financing. So, you know, like the resume says, I've been to Iraq a zillion times. And when I went, you know, the original terrorists worked with a US bank and they were able to fund their operation. But when I met with the banks, they wouldn't, if they had a terrorist account, they would close it quietly and never say anything. And I kind of brought them all together and said, this has to stop. We all have to share best practices. If you guys get a widget and you find out it's compromised, we all need to know about that compromised widget. If you find a better solution, we all need to know about it, because we're one USA, okay? So this is not a competition, okay? If you let somebody out and they do something bad, then we all pay the price. So that's why I'm really about collaboration and cooperation and helping everybody so they can do their daily job and not worry about the threat.
I agree. We need more of that. Thank you. That was wonderful. So thank you, MJ, for joining us. Thanks to Wade Forbes, who's been drawing the conversation visually up there, and we'll send that out to folks who are in attendance today. Thanks to all of you in the audience. Really good conversation today. I hope you took away some tidbits, as MJ mentioned. Please join us for future town hall meetings. Our next session is going to be Wednesday, April 14th at our regular time of 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have Mark Montgomery. He's the executive director of the Cyberspace Solarium Commission. So a seminal report looking to shift the national strategy in terms of deterrence of cyber threats. So really, top level person there thinking about that from a national security perspective, and heavily involved in the policy aspects around how we execute that national strategy in law and other government actions. So please join us for that. It should be a very interesting conversation. If you don't have a registration for that, please visit our website at neosystemscorp.com for the details. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.